The 2012 Formula 1 season is without a doubt one of the best and strangest seasons in Formula 1 history. It's one of the ones that I remember the most fondly, and it's without a doubt one of the best I've ever seen in my lifetime. It was so competitive with so many different winners from so many different teams, but none more strange, none that stand out as much as Pastor Maldonado winning his only Formula 1 Grand Prix at the Spanish Grand Prix in 2012. 13 years ago, the Venezuelan stood on the top step of the podium. This was his only podium in Formula 1, and he won it. But how? How did he do it? Were there forces working behind the scenes in order to make this a reality? Because a conspiracy theory has emerged regarding this victory, and I'm going to go through that for you guys in this video today. I like going through these conspiracy theories and dissecting all the different angles and all the evidence for it. So let's have a look, guys. Let's have a look at what happened at the 2012 Spanish Grand Prix and whether there is a legitimate conspiracy theory regarding this race. So let's set the scene. Let's go through some background first before we get into the race itself. So the Spanish Grand Prix, held at the Circuit de Barcelona, Catalonia, was the 5th round of the Formula 1 Championship in 2012. Before this race, we had 4 different winners from the opening 4 Grand Prix. Jenson Button won the opening round of the season at the Australian Grand Prix, a track where he was an absolute master, winning 3 times in his career around here. Then we had, of course, Fernando Alonso in Malaysia, pulling off one of the greatest Grand Prix victories of all time in torrential rain conditions. Nico Rosberg then followed it up with his first win in Formula 1 at the Chinese Grand Prix, and Mercedes' first Grand Prix victory since returning to the sport in 2010. Sebastian Vettel, the defending champion from 2010 and 2011, made it 4 from 4 with a victory around Bahrain. And that meant that the championship was tight coming into this round. Vettel led the championship on 53 points, but he was only 4 points ahead of Lewis Hamilton, who, despite not winning a Grand Prix in 2012 by this point, was second in the standings on 49 points. Mark Webber, Vettel's teammate, was 1 behind Hamilton, which gave Red Bull the lead in the Constructors' Championship. But again, it was tight because Jenson Button, the other McLaren driver, was on 43 points, tied with Fernando Alonso's Ferrari. Red Bull were top of the constructors' standings, but only by 9 points from McLaren. Lotus and Ferrari were the next chasers, but a long way behind. But would it be 5 from 5? Would we get a 5th winner and a 5th different championship leader in the opening 5 races? Well, we did get a 5th different winner. We did not get a 5th different championship leader because, like I said in the intro, this was Pastor Maldonado's only Grand Prix victory. But how did he do it? How did this happen? Well, that's something that I'm still asking to this day, to be honest, because it's without a doubt one of the most peculiar one-off performances I have ever seen in Formula 1, but not completely without merit. I will get into that after I review the race and everything, but Maldonado was pretty quick over 1 lap, and he definitely was around Barcelona that weekend, but he was not the fastest man in qualifying. Hamilton claimed pole position, or so he thought, during qualifying on Saturday, but he was told to slow down and stop out on track. Oh no, something was going wrong, and that problem was that there wasn't enough fuel in the tank to provide a fuel sample to the FIA. So for those that don't know, you have to release a kilogram of fuel from your car after qualifying for scrutineering from the FIA, and back then Hamilton unfortunately fell foul of that. There wasn't enough fuel in the car, therefore it could be argued that he got an advantage from the lack of weight in the car, and he was disqualified from qualifying, thrown out. Now again, the conspiracy theorists may point to that and think, well, there you go, they've tried to fix it in favour of Maldonado and Williams. Don't worry, I will go in more in depth with that as we go through this, but the thing is, right, this wasn't the only time this happened in 2012. In fact, later in the season, Sebastian Vettel fell foul of the exact same thing at the Abu Dhabi Grand Prix, which meant that he was thrown out of qualifying and forced to start from the pit lane. Of course, he ended up somehow getting a podium from there, but that's another story for another day. Let's focus back on Spain. So that meant that Maldonado, who was in second before this, was promoted to pole position, but at the start of the race on Sunday, things didn't quite go to plan, because on the front row alongside him in P2 was the home hero himself, Fernando Alonso. And Alonso at this time was absolutely electric at the starts. He took no prisoners going down to turn 1, which is one of the longest runs on the calendar, and I think at that time actually the longest run on the calendar from the starting grid down to turn 1. He took the lead, and at that point a lot of people probably thought, well, Alonso's going to do what Alonso does. He's very quick. There's no reason why Maldonado will be able to catch him. He'll probably just fall away as this race goes on. But that didn't happen. But Maldonado kept tabs with Alonso in P2, and in truth it was really a 3-horse race between Alonso, Maldonado and Kimi Raikkonen, who was doing an incredible performance in his Lotus. Now Raikkonen was feeling pretty confident. He managed to get a P2 last time out in Bahrain, his best result at that time since making his comeback after a few seasons out of the sport. Alonso came in for his first stop on lap 10 of 66, and most people were thinking that this was going to be a 3-stop race. Pirelli at this time making tyres that wore away very, very quickly. People who think that Pirelli make tyres that are far too soft nowadays clearly were not around during the 2012, 11 and 13 era. That time in Formula 1 had some of the softest tyres that just melted away after a few laps. Honestly, kids don't know how good they have it these days. Maldonado led the race for a lap, but then came in a lap later. The undercuts at this point proving to be very powerful, and Alonso, after all the pit stops played out, led very comfortably, and that's something that Williams used to their advantage. They brought Maldonado in before Fernando Alonso for the second stop, and this was the decisive part of the race, because despite Maldonado coming into the pits, Ferrari did what Ferrari does, and they strategized themselves into a corner. Alonso, to be fair, did struggle at this point of the race because he got held up by Charles Pic in the Marussia while he was being lapped, something that caused Alonso to do, shall we say, some hand gestures towards the Frenchman. And because of that, when Alonso came into the pits, Maldonado, once things worked out, was leading the race quite comfortably, and that was the decisive move. Nothing changed through the third stops, and Maldonado's pace was absolutely incredible. It's just such an odd scene seeing Maldonado on the podium with Fernando Alonso and Kimi Raikkonen at the end of the race. It's like that picture of the horse that gets stuck between the gates. How did it get here? We have no idea how it got here. Like I said, Maldonado got his only Formula 1 victory during this race. He got his only ever pole position and his only ever podium too. And I also believe this is the only time that a Venezuelan driver has ever stood on the podium, ever won a race or got pole position. Pretty sure that Johnny Cecotto did not manage to do that in the 1980s, unfortunately. So yeah, Maldonado was the standout driver of the race that day. I'm not even saying that ironically. He was the best driver out there. His pace was incredible, and Williams' strategy really won it for them that day, and Ferrari's bad strategy unfortunately lost it for them. So we spoke a lot about Maldonado, but what about his teammate Williams, Bruno Senna, the nephew of the great Ayrton Senna? How did he get on during this race? Well, not very well, as it turned out. He qualified down in P17 and was taken out by Michael Schumacher after 12 laps, while Schumacher was trying to make a move on him down to turn 1. The two collided where Schumacher actually misjudged the braking zone and unfortunately were out as a result. Schumacher versus Senna didn't quite have the same weight to it in 2012 as it did in the early 1990s. And unfortunately for Schumacher, he did get a grid penalty for the next round in Monaco, and had he actually not got that grid penalty, he would have got pole position that day. More on that very shortly. But Maldonado's result, how much of a flash in the pan was it? Well, it was very much a big surprise, to be honest. In 2012, which by the way was only his second season in Formula 1, he made his debut the previous season for Williams, Maldonado finished in 15th place overall in the drivers' standings that year. And his best finish aside from this victory was a P5 in Abu Dhabi. In fact, he almost became the first F1 driver in history to drive full-time in the sport, claim a victory during the season, and not get a top 5 in any of the other rounds, but he did manage to do that in Abu Dhabi, but he came very close to it, just showing how inconsistent he and Williams were in 2012. His results in 2012 as a whole were, shall we say, sporadic, to put it politely. He'd only scored 4 points prior to the Spanish Grand Prix for a P8 in China, and as a whole for the season, he only scored points on 5 occasions out of 20 rounds, a quarter of the Grand Prix. Indeed, it took another 10 rounds. It took until Suzuka, Japan, for the Japanese Grand Prix to score any more points, which is just bonkers when you think about it. But you might think, by listening to that, you might think, well, that's proof then. That is proof there's something going on. This was a real outlier in his results, and it was an outlier, don't get me wrong. But it wasn't completely out of the blue, because to see, there's more to Grand Prix racing than just the racing. It's also the qualifying. Maldonado, without a doubt, during 2012 in particular, was rapid over one lap. I don't know whether it was the setup of that Williams. I don't know whether it was the tyres. I don't know whether it was just him riding a crest of confidence. But him getting second overall, if you put Hamilton back into the standings for qualifying, him getting second overall, it wasn't even his outright best qualifying result of the year. He managed to get second place at Singapore in the qualifying. He also managed to get a P3 at Spa before the penalty was applied there, a P6 at Germany, a P7 at Silverstone. He also got third place at Valencia as well, the other Spanish round of this season for the European Grand Prix. So yeah, this was his best qualifying performance, but not by a mile, not by that much. His qualifying over one lap, Maldonado was excellent at times in 2012. I am not saying that ironically at all. I'm being deadly serious. The guy was clearly on a real wave of confidence in qualifying. It's just in the race, he was very poor. He was very inconsistent. He would have got a podium at Valencia had he not had the crash with Lewis Hamilton, which when I look back at it, I think maybe Hamilton's more to blame on that one, but he should have avoided that contact. You know, to finish first you must finish, and unfortunately, the man didn't finish very often. And he was unlucky at times too. He was running well at Singapore, but he had a hydraulics failure there, so there was some bad luck in there as well, of course. Now, at the end of the day, when it comes to Williams, you know, they had their best result of the season here, obviously in Spain, but you look at the results of other teams from that year, other teams that won Grand Prix, because, you know, like I said in the intro, you know, we had 5 different winners now with Maldonado from the first 5 races. We ended up having 7 from 7. A lot of different constructors won races during this year. A lot of different drivers did too. And we did see a relative flash in the pan performance, or at least a few flashes in the pan early on in the season in 2012 from Mercedes. Now, Mercedes, they got their only win of the season at China. Now, I already mentioned that Mercedes got their only win of the year in 2012 at China. But they did have a few other good results as well, of course. You know, Rosberg managed to get P2 at Monaco. Schumacher, like I said before, he would have got pole position at Monaco had it not been for the grid penalty. Schumacher as well managed to get his final podium in Formula 1 at Valencia. That was an incredible race, by the way, Valencia. I mean, both of the Spanish rounds of that season were unbelievable. Just proving in the case of Valencia that even terrible tracks can produce fantastic races. So maybe there's hope for the Mad Ring yet. Probably not, actually. But anyway, let's get back on this topic. But the best weekend by far in terms of the Mercedes anyway was, you know, the Chinese Grand Prix. They would have got a 1-2 in that race had it not been for Schumacher having a wheel issue at the pit stop. So Mercedes very much had a few different factors at play: the weather conditions, the tyres, the track, the drivers, all of that sort of stuff really going off to actually combine to make a Grand Prix win, their only win of that season. Now, I think there were other things going on too. I think Mercedes were very much switching their development to 2014 as early as possible, you know, because they were to dominate the sport at that point, obviously. So maybe they were switching the taps off relatively early, although of course they did get a big performance boost in 2013, especially in qualifying anyway. And you know, in truth, it wasn't completely out of the blue to have you know, a relative one-off performance like this. Williams and Mercedes both had them in 2012, I would say. Williams a bit more extreme, but it still happened. But of course, we do need to talk about the conspiracy now. So there's a few different conspiracy theories going around online when it comes to this race. The main one is that basically some people think that Pirelli ended up supplying a special tyre to Williams in order for them to win this race. And now you might be wondering, why? Why would Pirelli do that? Why would they risk doing that? Now, the reason they claim why is that Pirelli, who were the sole tyre supplier to Formula 1 back then, as they are now, wanted to give a birthday present to Sir Frank Williams, the head and the founder of the Williams Formula 1 team. Now, in 2012, Sir Frank turned 70 years of age, and he is an absolute legend of the motorsport world, always will be. But there are a few holes with this. There are more holes than Swiss cheese, really, when it comes to this, to be honest with you. Not least because Sir Frank His birthday was a month before this. The 2012 Spanish Grand Prix took place on the 13th of May 2012. Frank Williams' birthday was the 16th of April. Yes, he turned 70 that year, and yes, this was the first European round of the season, so people tried to kind of massage it like that. But if they really wanted to give him a birthday present, why didn't they do it at the Chinese Grand Prix? That took place on the 16th of April. Sir Frank turned 70 the day after. Would that not have been a better present? So that whole reasoning about it being a conspiracy to give Frank Williams a birthday present is just absolutely ludicrous. I think they're really clutching at straws with that one, not least because the maths ain't mathing on that one, I'm afraid. Or the birthdays aren't birthdaying. I don't know what you'd say with that one, but either way, that's not a reason. Okay, so the birthday thing doesn't add up, but is there a... Okay, so obviously the birthday thing doesn't add up for Sir Frank, but is there some truth to the Pirelli tyres being special for this one round of the championship season? Well, if it is the case, and Maldonado had these special tyres on his car, Bruno Senna definitely didn't. He had an awful weekend like we already covered. But let's just say that this is the case, because at the end of the day, people do like to point out the fact that Pirelli did have some, well, not previous by this point, but the year later in 2013, of course, Pirelli did do their dodgy tyre test, to put it very mildly, with the Mercedes team at this same track, actually, at the Circuit de Catalunya, something that is probably going to be a topic for another video. So it wouldn't be completely out of the realms of possibility from that standpoint for Pirelli to do something a little bit underhanded. But is there any proof for this? Well, it's funny you mentioned that, because interestingly, something happened after the race that was just a bit crazy. The Williams garage, about 90 minutes after the Grand Prix had concluded, lit up on fire. Like, nobody died during this, which is a real big relief. Now, I haven't actually managed to find a concrete explanation for what caused the fire. Now, of course, the conspiracy theorists will have you believe that Williams did this to themselves, to light their own garage on fire, to hide any kind of evidence of wrongdoing, which, of course, is not true. Williams would definitely not do that. If they wanted to keep these things under wraps, they would have very much done this when people were out of the garage. They wouldn't risk the lives of their team personnel. That's sick to even consider that being a possibility, to be honest. I'm quite shocked that the F1, some people in the F1 community believe that. But basically, the leading theories when it comes to the fire being started is either due to a spark from the kinetic energy recovery system, the KERS system, on Senna's car, because Maldonado's car was out of the garage at the time, only Senna's car was in. It's either because of that or because of a fuel rig that was leaking fuel, something like that. We don't actually know what caused the incident, or at least I can't find any official sources that equivocally do actually prove this. And in fact, Maldonado's 12-year-old cousin Manuel nearly did get involved in that fire a little bit too much, unfortunately. He had a broken foot and he was unable to walk, so Maldonado actually got him out of there. So fair play, Pastor. You probably saved his life on that one. But whatever the cause of the fire, it's definitely odd to happen. But yeah, to suggest that's somehow part of this conspiracy is, yeah, I'm not really having that, to be honest, personally. And just one thing to add as well on the whole Pirelli tyre thing. What was the benefit of doing them tyres? What was the benefit of Pirelli doing that on one car, potentially, for Williams? And why Williams? Because of the birthday thing again? I don't know. I don't exactly buy that, to be honest with you. But yeah, you can actually see some footage of the fire actually starting, the inferno actually starting. There is a GIF that I found. I know a GIF rather than a video, strange, but probably because of copyright, that I found on Reddit that actually shows. I've never seen that before. And interestingly, running out of the blades with people like Valtteri Bottas, who was the test driver for Williams at that time, Toto Wolff and Susie Wolff as well, both investors, I believe, or at least Toto was anyway, are a board member in the Williams Formula 1 team. And Alex Verst was being interviewed by Ted Kravitz at that time. Obviously, everybody had to run out of the way of that fire. So like I said, 2012 was such an entertaining year. We had 7 different runners from the opening 7 rounds of the season. Fernando Alonso eventually took over the lead of the championship and looked like he was the heavy favourite to get his 3rd world title. But Sebastian Vettel, thanks to an incredible late run in the 2012 season, managed to get his 3rd world title in a row at the final round in Brazil. Maldonado, meanwhile, after 2012, he stayed at Williams all the way until 2013. 2014, he joined Lotus and raced there for a couple of seasons, and he eventually became the and he eventually became the test driver for Pirelli in 2016. Maybe that's a link between Maldonado and Pirelli. Maybe that does prove the conspiracy theories after all. They clearly liked him as a driver, and he remained in that role until 2017. After that, he eventually raced in World Endurance Championship and IMSA in sports car until 2019. I can't find any evidence that he's done any professional racing since then. All that time, though, he was genuinely holding out for it, come back to a Formula One seat, and that was deadly serious. He was not messing around when it came to that. In fact, I remember him being interviewed by Matt Gallagher, ex-Matty G to people who remember him back in the F1 game days. And basically, Maldonado, he was actually saying he was trying to go for a comeback, and Gallagher actually laughed at him, which was a bit awkward. He thought he was joking, but he wasn't. He was being deadly serious. That was quite an awkward conversation between the two of them. The only drivers that are still racing in Formula One who competed in 2012 are Hamilton and Alonso, who I mentioned in this, but also Nico Hülkenberg, who was driving for Force India at this time. I'll just give a quick rundown of the order in the end as well, the full race order. So like I said, Maldonado won this one. Alonso was in second. Kimi Räikkönen held in third place. Roman Grosjean, another good result for him. He got fourth place. Kamui Kobayashi, a very respectable fifth place in his Sauber. Sebastian Vettel in sixth for Red Bull. Rosberg, seventh for Mercedes. Sir Lewis Hamilton, he was in 8th place after starting from the back of the grid, managed to beat his teammate Jenson Button, who was in 9th place. He started in 10th, and Nico the Hulk, getting the final point from this race in 10th. So overall, guys, do I think this is a legit conspiracy theory? No, absolutely not. I don't buy it for a second, to be honest. It's interesting to theorize about these things, you know, it's all a bit of fun at the end of the day, but when there's a small section of F1 fans that genuinely think that Williams sabotaged their own garage and put dozens of people's lives at risk, including their own drivers, Nah, they did not do that. They did not try and burn the evidence from that. Pretty sure even if they did try and do that, then there'd be some way to recover it. You know, you could never truly hide all these digital footprints and stuff. There's always a way to recover them if you really do. But the only bit of credence I would give to this is the fact that Pirelli did do some dodgy practices in 2013 with that test with the Mercedes guys. So maybe that just kind of stoked the flames, for lack of a better term, when it comes to this. But guys, let us know your thoughts in the comments below. And also let me know, what do you want to see next? What conspiracy video in F1 do you want to see next? We've got a 2-week gap after Spain to the next round in Canada. So I'm all up for doing another one of these in-depth looks at a controversial race. Do you want me to do the 1989 Japanese Grand Prix? That's what I want to do personally, because that is a conspiracy theory that I must admit, before I go diving into everything to find evidence and review everything, that is one that I think there is serious credence to personally. But will my opinion be changed when I look more in depth about it? Your thoughts in the comments below, guys. Like, share, comment, subscribe if you want to see more like this, and I hope you have a fantastic day wherever you're in the world today. And that's up for a great Spanish Grand Prix this weekend. Who knows? We may get a rogue Lance Stroll victory. No, it's not going to happen, is it? That's never going to happen. But hey, that's the kind of levels we're talking here for Maldonado in 2012 in Spain. See you soon, guys. Have a great day.